Hey y'all, I'm Maggie, and you're watching another episode of Suncrest On Demand. Before we go any further, I'm sure someone is watching their first Suncrest On Demand video. I'm super excited that you're here. Help me help you. Text the word Suncrest to 94,000. When you do that, we'll send you a digital gift card directly to your phone for some coffee, simply for getting this far in the video. Now, here's a tip for everyone watching. Make sure you have the Suncrest app. When you use our app, you get insider access to things like past content, upcoming events, stuff to help you, your kids, and your students engage with their faith journey, and much, much more. Actually, if you're looking to take a next step in your own faith journey right now, our app is the best tool to use. You can find the Next Steps button right on the homepage. Take a look right now to sign up for baptism, join a group to find your people here at Suncrest, or join a serving team and make a difference. In our app and on our website, you can also partner with us financially. Your generosity makes a huge difference in Northwest Indiana and beyond through starting new churches. So, on behalf of all of us, thank you for using your finances to change lives. Here's how the rest of this video is going to go. We're going to experience some music. In fact, let us know a lyric you found meaningful in the live chat or comments. We're going to experience communion. Each week we focus on the sacrificial love of Jesus through a simple meal. So, now's the time to gather some food and drink to represent Jesus' body and blood. After the song is done, I'm going to put up a timer on the screen. Feel free to eat and drink when you are ready. After communion is done, we'll listen to this week's message. Once that's done, let us know something meaningful you heard in the live chat or comments. Let's get going.
Let the king of my heart be the mountain where I run, the fountain I drink from. Oh, he is my song. Let the king of my heart be the shadow where I hide, the ransom for my life. Oh, he is my song. You are good. You're good, oh, you are good, you're good, oh, you are good, you're good, oh, you are good, you're good, oh, let the king of my heart be the wind inside my sails, the anchor in the waves. Oh, he is my song. Let the king of my heart be the fire inside my veins, the echo of my days. Oh, he is my song. Let the king of my heart be the wind inside my sails, the anchor in the waves. Oh, he is my song. Let the king of my heart be the fire inside my veins, the echo of my days. Oh, he is my song. You are good, you're good. Oh, you are good, you're good. Oh, you are good, you're good. Oh, you are good, you're good. Oh,
you're never gonna let me down. 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 You're never gonna let me down.
Hey everyone, this last month, our lead pastor Greg celebrated a huge faithfulness milestone that we need to talk about. I know many of us have been personally impacted, myself included, by Greg's leadership and example. And it's been happening for 25 years right here at Suncrest. So right now, we're gonna celebrate that faithfulness with other leaders from around the globe. Check this out.
Greg Lee, Clint Dupin here from Easttown Church in the San Francisco Bay Area. They said, hey, Clint, take 15 minutes and share from your heart. So I said, okay. What's that, 15 seconds? How can you do anything in 15?
Leslie, did you hear? Greg Lee's been at Suncrest for 25 years. What? 25 years? I know!
Well, hey Greg, it's Jake Barker from Mission City Church in Santa Barbara. Congratulations on 25 years. Every time that we've ever talked, you've always added so much value and been such an encouragement to me and our church, and I know that happens at Suncrest every single day.
Hey Greg, congratulations on 25 years at Suncrest. That's awesome. So excited for you. I'm especially grateful that your role allows for you to serve and support church planters in partnership with us at Orchard Group. So thanks for that.
My name is Jeremy Brown. I'm the lead pastor at Journey Church in Jackson, Tennessee. You guys helped us start this church, almost 11 years ago. So excited about what God has done in the past, but we're so excited even more so about what's next. Greg, congratulations on 25 years. When did you get so old?
From Johnny and Janelle and the rest of the crew serving in Southeast Asia.
Congratulations, Greg. 25 years. That's awesome.
Greg, congratulations for your 25 years at Suncrest and for all your service to God.
What? Greg Lee's been there 25 years?
Does not look that old. Congratulations, Greg.
Greg Lee, this is Lou Pizzucillo from Community Church on Long Island, and I just want to say congratulations on 25 years at Suncrest. That's unbelievable, and I'm grateful for your faithfulness, and I'm one of the beneficiaries. Community Church is one of the beneficiaries of your faithfulness to Suncrest, so keep doing what you're doing. Here's to another 25 years at Suncrest.
What a cool opportunity to thank you, Greg, on your 25 years of ministry. So thank you for your servanthood to Suncrest and your belief in me and my family. We could not have done it without your leadership. It's been so much fun to watch via social media what you guys are doing there and how you're leading that organization, Greg.
Hey, Derek Puckett here, lead pastor and church planter at Renewal Church of Chicago. Just want to jump on and tell you, congratulations, my friend and brother, Greg Lee. 25 years at Suncrest, man, that's amazing. I can only hope to do the same here at Renewal. Congratulations, bro.
Hey Greg, congratulations, 25 years at Suncrest, that is a big deal. Scott Tobby here from East Point Christian Church in Portland, Maine. Thanks to Suncrest for helping plant us almost 18 years ago. Have a great celebration. God bless you guys.
Hey Greg, just wanted to take a second and say congratulations on 25 years in ministry, and thankful for you and Jenny and your dedication to both Suncrest and to the region.
Greg, 25 years, man, you've been at Suncrest, and you started when you were 50? You are 75. You look great. You look great. Anyways, man, we are so thankful for you. Happy 25th anniversary. You are an incredible man of God. So thankful for you, thankful for Suncrest and your belief in church planting. Hey, have a special day.
Hey Greg, congrats on 25 years. I remember 25 years ago when we were working together and you were like, hey, what do you think about this church in Indiana, Suncrest? Hey, it's worked out. Thanks for all that you've done. Thanks for what you've done here at the Village. We're so grateful to you. Happy 25 years.
Hey Greg, 25 years at Suncrest. You literally, as David Stern said about Michael Jordan, you are the standard by which greatness is measured.
Greg, best wishes and God's blessings to you as you remember the 25 years at Suncrest. You have been a faithful servant to God and calling, and wish you many more years of serving Him.
So I won't be so surprised Sunday morning. That's kind of how I'm feeling about this right now. So that's kind of overwhelming. 75th birthday, you caught that? Yeah. All right. Well, let's. I know where I'm going with this message today, and there's going to be some irony in the idea that was just on the screen and where I'm going with the message. So let's just kind of dive into it right here. So, hey, Suncrest, how you doing? Good. Seriously, it's good for me to be back. I've been out of here the last 3 weekends. We took a 2-week family vacation, which I got to tell you a little bit about this story. We about 6 years ago, it hit me that as my older kids were becoming teenagers, that I only had so many years left to make these memories, to take these trips, those sorts of things. And like it was almost, I think it was a thing from God to say, man, you got to decide that you will take time and spend some money every summer to make sure you have these memories. And so we've been doing that every single year. And we had a great trip. It was awesome. Got to see all kinds of things. I want them to see the country that we live in. I want to see great sights. I want to see great cities. And we had 3,500 miles on the road. Have I mentioned we have a 2-year-old? 3,500 miles. You know, like this is how it works. This is kind of my picture of it. When we're at home, you know, you have your 2-year-old. Some of you are raising young kids like this. You're like, he asks for a show. You're like, no, not a show, trying to eliminate screen time. By the end of our vacation, I'm like, hey, you want a show? That'd be awesome. So, but one of the things that's important to me about that is there are markers in our lives sometimes where you get a little chance to look ahead and think, well, when I get there and I look back, how do I want things to be? And that was just kind of a small thing for me with these family vacations. And then last week, I was actually out in New York City at the new church that we started out there. You saw Lou on the screen. I was hanging out with him last weekend. And this is a picture of me preaching last weekend out there. And I thought, if I stand here just like this, doesn't that look kind of weird, like this infinity picture going on? But here's what really hit me is I got a bald spot right there. You know, that's what happens when you look at pictures. You just see yourself, right? So does it really happen when I turn this way? No, never mind. New York City, you gotta get this. This church is doing amazing things. They started 2 months before COVID shut everything down, and they're just thriving today. And one of the things about this church is that they did all the technical things right? The good strategy, good vision casting, good teaching, good budgeting, good things you have to do to get a church in a healthy spot. But theirs is a story of things that God did. Things that God did. That no one could have strategized. No one could have figured out. No one could have tactically made it happen. And I think it's a very beautiful and powerful thing when we see that. When Lou introduced me to speak last week, he was just raving on all of you. And he basically said, we are the church we are today because of Suncrest. We've followed their model on so many things. And so they're serving their region and they're doing kids ministry the way we do it and all those sorts of things. And so, thank you for being a generous church like that. But obviously, Dan was working through this series on the story of David that we're going to wrap up today. And I've been following it online and just kind of, thinking back to all these events in David's life that were definitely a combination of bitter and sweet. And one of the things that kind of hit me as I'm looking at these very last instances of David's life today to look back is a principle that I try to come back to fairly often. This is that principle. That life with God appreciates the tension of relevance and reverence. Now, I want to ask you to think about your own life with God right now and whether you're more prone to lead toward relevance. That is the sense that I understand how God works in my life. He helps me make these decisions. It's just really practical for my life. And reverence, which is to say, I look up and I just honor God. I understand who God is. I understand he's much larger than who I am. And most of us probably swing one direction or the other in the way that we think about this. In fact, I'll tell you my experience. I grew up in a church that kind of had the pendulum swing over on the reverence side. And in that church growing up, I learned a lot about the holiness of God, the awesomeness of God, to have reverence for God, even about the judgment of God, which is an important part of who God is. But I struggled sometimes growing up in that church to see how that played into real life. And I've talked to many of you who say the same thing about your church experiences when you were growing up. You're like, yeah, it never really made sense to me in real life. Like I learned these lessons about God, but how does it fit in real life? And so I've spent 25 years basically trying to make sure that everyone I teach to sees the relevance of the scriptures, to see how this thing of God actually works in real life. And I'm really into helping people see that. It's almost like a how-to message when it comes to God and faith. But sometimes I worry that in trying to help all of you see how practical and relevant the scriptures are to your life day in and day out, that sometimes it might draw our image of God to think that God is something like us, when the truth is God is nothing like us. God created you in his image, but God is so much larger. God is so much more holy. God is the creator and sustainer of all things. He's the one who gives you life and breath and everything else. And to think that we would be buddy-buddy with God, or that this is just about a how-to manual for how to get through my day or my week, or to get God to do what I want him to do, that would be missing it entirely. And I want to make sure that in our experience together, we don't swing all the way to relevance and think, how? I want instead for us from time to time to just step back and say, wow, God. Maybe I should just hit my knees. Maybe I should just lay face first on the ground and say, God. And actually I think when we get to the end of David's life, it's actually some of those moments in our lives where we get to the end and we're looking back, where it helps us to see things from the big picture and we're not just trying to manage the day-to-day, that we actually are reminded of the reverence for God. And so before we close out David's story, he is going to help us step back to the reverence of God. The passage in 2 Samuel 23 begins like this. It says, "These are the last words of David." Now, a little context for you. I'm going to show you 3 separate instances that stack up right at the end of David's life. This is the first one. So these aren't actually the last words out of his mouth. We'll get to those. This is him saying, this is what I want to leave with you. This is what I've decided what I want to say, and I want everyone to hear what I have to say. And, last words do carry more weight, don't they? I was at a visitation this week for a gentleman in our church who passed away, and I was talking to his daughter, and she was describing being there and holding his hand as he died. And she talked about the last moments, or just before he died, he opened his eyes and they shared. And it's just like there's something really weighty, something appropriately weighty about the last moments and the last words of someone's life. Why wouldn't there be? You're preparing to move from this very earthly, tangible existence to an eternity that is either with God for all eternity or apart from God for all of eternity. It should be a weighty time. I remember when we put my dad into hospice care. And I was back in my hometown. We were making those decisions and we were getting things arranged. But then I had to leave. I had to drive away and come back home. And I'll never forget the last conversation that I thought might be our final one. I didn't know at the time. And there was just a weightiness to it where you choose your words wisely, and you're not talking about how to. You're talking about the wows and the big things of life. And that's what we have from David. And so I just want the end of his life to guide us to 3 reverence questions. I hope this will impact the way you live your life day in and day out. I think they have relevance to them, but they don't start at relevance. They have a reverence to them that we all should ask about ourselves. Question number 1. What do I fear? So what do you fear? What are you afraid of? What did you not do today that you kind of look back and think, well, I wish I would have done it, but you didn't do it because you were afraid? What did you not do this last year that you look back and you think, oh, I wish I would have done it. I wish I would have fought through it, but I didn't do it because I was afraid. For a lot of us, we could just take this moment in time in our life right now. I'm 47, by the way, not 75. So for me, first 47 years of my life, you, however many years you have, think about this. Is the story of my life to this point, the story of your life to this point, is it more driven by aspirations and dreams and what God wanted me to do and I went for it? Or is the story of your life to this point more driven by, I actually haven't done those things because I was afraid? I mean, fear's a driver. For most people, it shapes your life. People don't go out and start a new business because they're afraid to lose their health insurance. People are afraid to end up alone, and so they marry someone they should never marry. People are afraid of what their kids will think. They're afraid of what their neighbors will think. They're afraid of failure. And all those fears, they drive us. And it's a very significant question, a reverence question of life. What or who do I fear? Because whoever or whatever you fear, it will shape your life. So when David says, these are my last words, this is what he says. The God of Israel spoke, the rock of Israel said to me, when one rules over people in righteousness, when he rules in the, get this, fear of God. This is important for any place you are in life, but it's extraordinarily important, as David observes, when you're in a leadership role in life. When you're responsible for a group of people, he was responsible for a nation, you're responsible for a family or a set of employees or whatever it is. And the question is, what's driving you? And he's suggesting that it would be a healthy fear of God that would actually make you a great leader. What is the fear of God? Well, it's not sitting in the fetal position down in the corner, afraid of what God might do. The whole idea behind fear is reverence. It's that I respect him. It's that I will honor him. It's that I'm actually more afraid of disappointing him than disappointing my buddies. I'm more afraid of dishonoring him. I'm more afraid of missing out on what he has for me than missing out on something else life has for me. Can you imagine living a life where your primary fear was a healthy fear of God? And in this conversation, David, don't miss this, David introduces the idea of his salvation, of his eternity. And he says, my goodness, you live in the fear of God and you pass from this life to the next and you are with God. If you walk through this life and your posture toward God is dismissive, I doubt any of you in this room would literally flip God off, but being dismissive to someone is just kind of that image of like, yeah, I'm kind of doing my own thing. I'm driven by my own fears. And he says, oh, you don't want to end up at the end of your life. You don't go into the next life like that. And then he gives us this image, and this is so important to me. He says, when a ruler lives in the fear of God, he is like the light of morning at sunrise on a cloudless morning. Do you know what that is? That is a suncrest. It's actually the beauty, it's the hope. It's when you look out and the sun crests above the horizon and you think it's a new day, there's possibilities. God is here with me again today. And there's a beauty to it. Actually, get this image. He says, it's like the brightness after the rain that brings grass from the earth. What a beautiful image. A ruler who lives in the fear of God, a dad or a mom who lives in the fear of God. You're like the person who, after the rain, you're like drawing life, drawing the grass out of the earth. It's a beautiful thing. And it's actually the scriptures that talk about how valuable this fear is in our everyday lives. In Proverbs, which is written actually by David's son, it says, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. It's really hard to understand anything about this world if you don't first understand to have a healthy respect for God. Other places the scriptures say that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. The fear of the Lord is actually what gives you confidence. The fear of the Lord is what gives you security. Because the sense is, if you're doing what God wants you to do, if that's what drives you, then anything else can happen. But I plead with you at the end of David's life to let the fear of God, a healthy, reverent, honorable, respectful fear of God, shape your life. Question number 2. Whose glory do I seek? You get to the end of your life, or you get to where you are right now, and this is a really big question. Hey, out of all the ways I arranged my life, out of all the stories I told, out of the things I did, out of the pictures I shared, out of all those things, who was I hoping would get the glory out of that? And listen, we're human beings, right? And so there's a great tendency to get the glory for ourselves. Right after David had said, "These are my last words, live in the fear of the Lord," there's a little story right at the end of 2 Samuel where it says that David went and had a census taken of all his fighting men. Now that may not seem like a big deal to you, but there's actually a law in the Old Testament in the book of Exodus that says men, kings in particular, should not take a census of their fighting men. Because when you take a census of your fighting men, you're basically saying, so how big of an army have I built? How many people have I taken over? How many people do I have in my army? Look at me. And there's actually a law that says only take a census when God tells you to take a census. But David wasn't listening to it. He's like, you know what I'd like to have before I die? I'd like to have a little pat on the back. I'd like to make a video about me for being here for 25 years. Whose glory do you seek? David had to send a guy out to make this count. The guy, Joab, this is one of his commanders that's shown up all throughout the story. Joab's like, do you really want to do that? And David doubles down. I really want to do that. And then he did it. And then after he did it, this is what the scriptures say. David was conscience stricken after he had counted the fighting men. And he said to the Lord, I have sinned greatly in what I have done. I don't want you to miss this. At the end of David's life, when he decided to shine the light on himself, when he decided he deserved some glory, when he wanted to see what all of his accomplishments were, he was convicted that this was one of the worst things he could have done. He says, now, Lord, I beg of you, take away the guilt of your servant. I'm sorry that at the end of my life, I wanted to go out and make sure everybody knew how great I was. And I beg, I humble myself. God, this is what begging is. To take away my guilt. This is a big deal. Not to take away the feeling of my guilt. But this is what humble people do. People who don't have to have the light shine on themselves. They can look in themselves and say, I was wrong. God, I need you to take away my guilt. Because I'm a servant and I've done a very foolish thing. I think if at the end of David's life we get a lesson about reverence for God and who gets the glory, I think what it would call on you and I to do is to never again tell a story about yourself where you're the hero. Never again, the rest of your life. I think it would call on you to never again post a picture where the goal is for you to look good. Never again. It says, I'm done with the life that needs to shine light on me. And instead, I need to become less so that God, who is great and reverent and greatly to be praised, gets it all. It's interesting, David has a little conversation with God after he comes clean about this. he decides that he needs to go and make a sacrifice to God. And actually, he goes to a guy's house, and the guy says, hey, actually, you're the king. You use some of my cattle, use some of my animals here. You can have them to make a sacrifice. And David has a very interesting response to this guy. He says, no, I can't take what you've given me to make a sacrifice from God. I insist on paying you for it. And here's the conviction. This is how you know you're not having the glory for yourself. I will not sacrifice to the Lord my God things that cost me nothing. The way that I ensure that God is getting the glory with my life and not myself getting the glory with my life is that I notch myself down. I make sacrifices of myself. I give up things that I want and I give them to God. I honor this reverent, gracious, holy Creator God by never thinking his life is about me and my needs and my wants and my desires and making me look good and making me feel good and solving my problems. You see, this is where people get tripped up. If your relationship with God begins and ends with the idea that God would solve your problems, then you never open yourself up to the idea that God might actually be speaking to you through those problems, that God might be growing you through those problems, that God might be teaching you something through those problems, that he's actually not interested in solving the problem, he's actually interested in your faith and your development. But when we have this human-centric, self-focused faith, where my only value for God is what he can do for me, I think it's belittling to the God of the universe. And so at the end of David's life, he answers the question, finally gets it right. Whose glory am I looking for? And one of my prayers for all of you, at least all of you who are followers of Jesus, is that when you tell the story of the good things in your life, that you do not leave out God and his provision in your life and his goodness to you when you tell those stories. If the stories of the goodness in your life do not include the glory to God, I beg of you to live in the fear of God and tell what he has done. Question number 3. What guides my path? So when you and I think about this question for ourselves, we probably have to stop for a moment and say, okay, what dilemma am I facing right now? What decision am I facing? What seems overwhelming to me as I'm trying to step into tomorrow, next week, this next year? What's guiding this? Maybe you're perplexed about how to raise teenagers. Maybe you have a boss that is impossible to work for. Maybe someone has done you wrong, or there's relational strife all over you, or you have financial pressure and you're like, what is going to guide my way out of this? What will guide my path? And whenever I have this conversation with people, of course, people want a relevant answer. They want to know step 1 and step 2 and step 3 to solve the problem that is right in front of them. And I think God has answers, but they all begin with looking up. In David's very last words, he's having a conversation with his son Solomon. Solomon is the son of Bathsheba, with whom David committed adultery. You can almost just recycle all these stories we've heard from David's life. The glorious ones, the anointing early on, the killing of Goliath when he trusted God, The times when he held back from killing Saul when he had the chance, the time when Abigail intervened and kept him from this great destruction, and then the times when he went his own way. What guided his path? His desire to sleep with somebody. He was the king. He had the power. Ended up having to kill somebody over it. Caused great destruction in his whole family, his kids. He's messed it up. All of it. What guides your path? And if David is speaking to his son who is about to become king, what does he say to him? Here's what he says. When the time drew near for David to die, he gave a charge to Solomon, his son. I am about to go the way of all the earth. My life, your life, our lives that are just but a mist. The funeral that I went to this week, the gentleman was over 90 years old. Great life, amazing life. And 90 years, get this, but a mist compared to the life to come. He says, I'm going the way of the earth. So, Solomon, be strong. Act like a man, not like a boy. And observe, this is it, what the Lord your God requires. When you face a dilemma, when someone's done something unfair to you, when you have an impossible boss or you don't know what to do with your teenager, or any of those situations, when you face a dilemma, before you try to figure it all out, lift your eyes up, have some reverence for God, and decide, I will only do things that God would have me do. God will guide this. Nothing else. He almost doubles down on it. Walk in obedience to him and keep his decrees and commands, his laws and regulations. And it's fascinating if you know a little bit about the story of Solomon, that as David shares this with Solomon, Solomon's no doubt soaking it all up, taking it all in, and then after David dies, Solomon reigns. Actually, fast forward all the way to the end of Solomon's life. Solomon wrote the book of Song of Solomon. He wrote the Proverbs in the middle of his life, and at the end of his life, he wrote his own memoir. We call it Ecclesiastes. And what Solomon recounts is all the things he did to try to find meaning in life. And actually, he didn't take his dad's advice. Please don't miss this. Solomon's conclusion after chasing wine and women and wealth and everything else was this: meaningless. Everything is meaningless. When I set my sights on the things of this earth and I thought, well, that'll make me feel better, that'll make me feel successful, that'll make me look good, I go through all of it, I get to the end, it's meaningless. It's like a chasing after the wind, he says. He says, you don't want to get to the end of your life and look back on it and say, I lived a meaningless life. I regret it. I missed out. And then he gives some context to it. He says, everything is meaningless under the sun. And under the sun is his way of saying apart from God. There's the above the sun. There's when we look up, when we have reverence for God, when we appreciate all that he is. And then there's the under the sun, which is kind of the real life. And I'm just trying to figure out everything. And he says, man, you're going to have to lift your eyes up above the sun. And actually, when Solomon gets to the end of his memoir, he says, ironically, so at the end of the matter, fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. And this is what David's saying. After he gave these words to Solomon, this is how it finishes. Do this. You follow God's way. You follow his decrees. You follow his laws. Do this so that you may prosper in all you do and wherever you go. You may feel like you're missing out. But when the answer to what guides my path, how am I going to handle being wronged by someone else, a boss who's a jerk? How am I going to handle these things? I do only what the Lord guides me to do. It's the path forward. So, after all that David's been through, we get the chance to fast forward to the end of his life and watch him look back. And I think the gift to you and I is that we can fast forward to the end of our lives, however many years we think we have left, and say, when I look back, what do I want to make sure is true of my life? And I don't have a 3-step plan to make sure that on your deathbed, you don't live with regrets. But I do know this. If you fear God instead of man, if you live for God's glory instead of your own glory, and when you're making the decisions about how to handle things in your life, you follow the new covenant commandment that says, love one another just as I've loved you. There is meaning in that. And that will be a life well lived.
Before you turn off this video, hit the like, subscribe, and share buttons. We'll see you next week, same time, same channel. And until then, go and be the church. All right.